John, Sam, and Linda were three best friends who loved adventure and thrill. They decided to go on a camping trip in the deep woods, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The trio packed their bags with all the necessary camping gear, including tents, sleeping bags, food, water, and a few flashlights. They drove for hours until they found a secluded spot deep in the woods, surrounded by tall trees and dense bushes. The trio set up their campsite and started a fire. They roasted marshmallows and shared spooky stories. As the night grew darker, they decided to retire for the night and sleep in their respective tents. They were tired from the long drive and the tiring day of setting up camp. As John, Sam, and Linda slept, they heard strange noises outside their tents. They tried to ignore them, thinking it was just the wind or some wild animals, but the noises grew louder and closer. Suddenly, they heard footsteps approaching their tents. They were terrified and held their breaths, hoping that the footsteps would go away, but they didn't. The footsteps stopped right outside their tents, and the trio could hear someone or something breathing heavily. John, Sam, and Linda were too scared to look outside, so they stayed put in their tents. They prayed that whoever or whatever was outside would go away, but it didn't. The trio could hear the breathing getting louder and closer, and they could feel the presence of someone or something looming over them. Just when they thought it couldn't get any scarier, they heard a loud growling sound. It was a deep, guttural growl that made their blood run cold. The growling was coming from right outside their tents, and it sounded like it was getting angrier and more aggressive. John, Sam, and Linda were now convinced that something dangerous was outside their tents. They knew they had to act fast to protect themselves. John grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of his tent, shining the light towards the direction of the growling. What he saw made him freeze in terror. In front of him was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was massive, with sharp claws and teeth, and glowing eyes. It looked like a mix between a bear and a wolf, but much bigger and more ferocious. The creature snarled at John and started to charge at him. John ran back to his tent and woke up Sam and Linda, telling them about the creature outside. They quickly packed their bags and tried to make a run for it, but the creature was too fast. It chased them deep into the woods, and they soon realized that they were lost. As they wandered through the woods, they heard strange noises and saw eerie figures lurking in the shadows. They were cold, hungry, and scared. They couldn't find their way back to their car, and they had no idea where they were or how to get out of the woods. Days turned into weeks, and John, Sam, and Linda were still lost in the woods. They were slowly running out of food and water, and their spirits were crushed. They had given up hope of ever getting out of the woods alive. One night, as they were huddled together for warmth, they saw a strange figure approaching them. It was a woman with long hair and a white dress. She had a serene expression on her face, and she beckoned them to follow her. John, Sam, and Linda were hesitant at first, but they were so desperate to find a way out of the woods that they decided to follow the woman. The woman led them to a small clearing in the woods, where there was a cabin. The cabin looked old and abandoned, but there was smoke coming out of the chimney. The woman disappeared as soon as they reached the clearing, leaving John, Sam, and Linda alone. They cautiously approached the cabin, and as they got closer, they could hear strange noises coming from inside. The trio was scared, but they were also intrigued. They decided to investigate and see what was inside the cabin. As they opened the door, they were greeted with a gruesome sight. There were body parts scattered all over the room, blood stains on the walls, and a strange symbol drawn on the floor. They realized that they had stumbled upon a cult's sacrificial ritual. Before they could react, they were ambushed by the cult members. They were outnumbered and outmatched, and they had no chance of escaping. The cult members tied them up and brought them to the center of the symbol on the floor. The cult leader emerged from the shadows, holding a knife in his hand. He explained to John, Sam, and Linda that they were chosen as sacrifices to their dark lord. The cult leader started to recite an incantation, and the room was filled with a dark energy that made the trio feel weak and helpless. As the cult leader was about to strike the first blow, the woman they had followed earlier appeared out of nowhere. She had a serene expression on her face, and she walked towards the cult leader fearlessly. The cult leader was surprised to see her and hesitated for a moment. The woman took advantage of the situation and lunged at him, disarming him. She then started to recite her own incantation, one that was powerful enough to banish the Dark Lord and his followers. The room was filled with a bright light, and the cult members were consumed by it. John, Sam, and Linda were freed from their restraints, and the woman led them out of the cabin. As they walked through the woods, they could feel the darkness lifting, and the birds started to chirp again. They eventually found their way out of the woods and were rescued by a search party. John, Sam, and Linda were traumatized by their experience, but they were grateful to be alive. As they looked back on their camping trip, they realized that they had unknowingly stumbled upon a cult's sacrificial ritual. They shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if the woman hadn't intervened. They decided never to go camping in the woods again and to stick to safer adventures.